And it looks like we're live. Hey, everybody, it's Roberto. So today we're going to be doing an episode of the podcast. As usual, I'm going to do the green room with you guys for about like 5 minutes, chat, welcome everybody, and then we'll start the show and get into the recording of that. And I think it's going to be a really interesting show today. I'm going to be talking about what I would do if I was broke today. And I think it's important because I definitely have a perspective on this as someone who survived the previous recession. So I'm going to be talking from that perspective. I also made it clear in the description, but I'm going to tell you guys up front here. I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying this from a position of privilege as someone who's successful. I'm saying it from a position of someone who's comfortable as somebody who's successful, because I came from an underprivileged background, and there's just things that don't change because your money does, right? So there are just experiences that you live through that continue on. And then there's also the perspective of being a person of color in America today. So I don't want people to get the wrong idea or want to make up their own narrative in their head with this easy for you to say thing. It's that I figured out what worked in the circumstances I had. I've been able to actually help other people through it over the years, both friends, family, and also people that I've coached and helped transition out of these situations. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about a couple of like really key points that make all the difference when you're in a bad financial situation, or if you happen to lose your job. Because remember, you can be fired even if you did nothing wrong. You could be downsized. There could be things that happen in your industry where you end up being displaced. So I just want to make all of that very clear up front before we start the show. I want to say hi to Chef Lizette. I want to say hi to my boy Jamie up in Canada. Enrico, how's it going? Miss Click and Michael, thank you for joining me on the show this morning. Let's see. I'm just going to have a little bit more water, and then I'll cue the intro. We'll jump into this show. We'll definitely thank our sponsor, StreamYard, for letting me simulcast across the interwebs. They're dope. But also, please do me a favor, and if you think this is going to be a very valuable and important topic, please feel free to share it out. And then after the podcast, we will do a little bit of Q&A. All right, let's start the show.
Welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast, where it's all about educating and motivating creative pros and entrepreneurs from around the world with simple and easy to implement ideas. And of course, helping you create something awesome today. And now, welcome your host. He is the founder of Awesome Creator Academy, a YouTube educator, and the biggest Star Wars nerd you'll ever meet, Roberto Blake.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Create Something Awesome Today podcast. This is your host, Roberto Blake, helping you create something awesome today. So today we have a really interesting topic. I'm going to be talking about what I would do personally today if I were broke. And I think it's important for any of you who are not in the live audience and didn't catch the pre-show to know that, like, I'm 36 years old. I was an adult in the previous recession, the previous economic crash. And I spent most of my adult life through my mid-20s all the way up to my late 20s struggling financially, living paycheck to paycheck. I came from what you could call, I guess, an underprivileged background. I didn't have a 4-year degree. I had to go to community college, couldn't afford it. My parents divorced when I was a teenager. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. And I am a person of color living through today's America, and I always have been. So I actually really do know what it is to struggle, to be broke, to go through hardship. I watched my mom as a single parent go through it. So I have that perspective. I really do. And I can actually empathize with anyone who's going through it today, even though I'm not going through it right this moment. And I remember the hard lessons that made a difference in my life and allowed me to be where I am today, because unfortunately, over the years that I lived through my hardship, the world didn't change for me. The world didn't get magically better. There were no policies or anything really enacted that made a significant difference for me or my family. There was nobody who was going to change it. And this is not lift yourselves up from the bootstraps. And I'm tired of people like debating that point on both sides of it. Here's what I do understand. What I understand is it's more likely that the person who's going to act in your best interest is probably going to be you. The person, I want you to really think about that. The person most likely to act in your best interest is going to be you. The person who knows what needs to change in your life, what needs to improve in your life, knows what you need, is probably you. So I just don't think that you can have the expectation that it's going to change by any other means. It'd be great if it does. I'm not even suggesting that there are systems in our societies that shouldn't change. I'm just making the reasonable bet that they won't change in time for what you're going through. And I think that's fair. I think it's fair if you look at your own history to say, has anything ever changed from the outside that really was in my best interest and made my life better? And even when it did it show up when I needed it to? Did it happen fast enough? And for those of you who are in the live audience, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Periscope, I would love for you in the live comments, or if you're watching the replay in the comment section of the video, to please tell me if you can relate to that, if you resonate with that when change comes, it doesn't come fast enough to help you or someone in your situation. And historically, has it ever? So again, I believe that we are the best agents of change in our own life and the lives of the people that we want to help, usually our friends, our family, our communities. I believe that we end up being the strongest potential for any change that we want in our own lives. And I really mean that. And that's not a lift yourself up by the bootstraps situation. That's a who do you trust, you or somebody else? Who do you trust to get it right? Who do you trust to act in your best interest? Who do you trust to care about you the most? And the answer should be the person that you see in the mirror, because that should come from a place of not only self-efficacy, but really a place of self-love. So that's what I'm really getting at, and that's where I find the truth to be. So I don't think it's political in nature. I think it's personal in nature. But that's just my point of view. So what would I do if I were broke today? Well, most of the time when people end up in a situation where they're broke, it's because there's an outside circumstance that changed in their life that they didn't have a ton of control over or agency. The most likely situation is that you lose your job one way or another. So we're going to go with the assumption that maybe you've lost your job either because of an economic downturn where you were either laid off or for whatever reason you were fired, whether it's your fault or not. So let's go ahead and operate off of that reasonable assumption kind of as our baseline. I think the first thing you have to do is, before you even look at replacing your income, is to look at your current levels of spending and to find out how much money you need to survive, how much money you need to feel okay, and how much money you need to maintain your current lifestyle. And then I think you have to look at where you can cut things that are unnecessary immediately to take pressure and stress off of yourself in terms of the amount of money that you have to replace and make up. And this is something that you'll hear almost everybody who makes a video or does this subject matter ever talk about. My friend Pat Flynn, great entrepreneur. He does a daily live stream right now called The Income Stream. He's also the founder of Smart Passive Income, one of the greatest podcasts on the internet. I've been a guest on there before. And he's somebody who was a mentor from afar that has become a good friend of mine. And I really love and respect him. And he has a great story and a journey. He was laid off in the last recession from his job as an architect. He didn't do anything wrong. His boss loved him, but they were shuttering their doors. But he got a heads up. He got a 3 months heads up. Most people don't get that. So he started looking for other opportunities. And one of the first things he did, he and his fiance, was look at spending. They were planning to get married. They wanted to do this wedding. They, were planning on starting their family. And this plan got derailed by something that Pat had no control over, something that they didn't make a choice about. So the answer became immediately to look at spending. So they moved in to her parents' place to save money. ultimately, that took one of the biggest expenses, rent, off of the table. I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but sometimes in an extreme, that's one of the biggest immediate things you can do from a survivalist standpoint is go to some extremes. Maybe you eliminate your biggest expenditure, which is your actual cost of living, your roof, your literal overhead. And so then it was looking at all the other things. It was looking at all the other things that could be done to reduce the amount of money that would have to be made up in terms of surviving and then fighting their way back. I looked at something similar when I was in my situation, and it was hard. It was painful. It was something that I resented doing at the time, but it was absolutely necessary. For me, it even took the extreme of having to pawn things. That's how bad it can get sometimes. Is I found myself in the situation where not only did I have to look at where I could reduce spending and cost, I had to actually get rid of things that I had worked for, that I had bought, that I had an attachment to, just to make sure that I had the money to pay bills so my circumstances wouldn't get worse. And so one of the things I would say that you look at is your spending. And here are some tools that can help you with that. None of these are our sponsor. We'll get to our sponsor in a moment. But in terms of tools, I even to this day use the Mint app, which you can get from mint.com, M-I-N-T, mint.com. And I also use Truebill, and these are free. And the reason I use these in addition to my banking app is they help me break down my spending and also where my money is going and how much money I have and things like that. One of the things it can also help you with is figuring out where you have subscriptions that you haven't canceled, money that's leaving every month that you haven't thought of, that it didn't occur to you that, oh, here's $5, $10, $15, $50 that I didn't know about. You also can use these to negotiate lower bills. You could maybe get a lower insurance payment in terms of your car insurance. You might be able to negotiate a lower internet and phone bill. There are all these things. Also consider things like going to a lesser package on your cable phone internet. Maybe and maybe you do trade-offs. Maybe you cut the cable and you go and you get Netflix or Hulu instead. And so you go from, okay, I'm going to go from spending another $60 a month to spending like $6 or $8 a month. That way you don't feel completely deprived, but at the same time, you have some entertainment, some escapism, because you can't only work sometimes. Sometimes you need at least that 30 minutes or an hour a day. I understand that. Me, when it comes to extremes, I'm like, screw it all. Every minute of the day until I get out of the hole is going toward addressing my situation. But I go to extremes, right? So one of the things that I would look at is ways to just reduce those bills, because they add up. As you know, the little things, they all add up. So using something like Mint and Truebill and knowing what to cut, but also where you can reduce your payments, you can end up saving hundreds of dollars, which will then reduce your anxiety, because you're like, okay, I don't need to work as much to make up the difference in terms of my base level of surviving. So know exactly the dollar amount you need to survive, and then also the dollar amount that you need to be comfortable, and know what that is. The next thing I would do is I would break that monthly number down. I would break that monthly number down and know what's the weekly number for that. What's the weekly number for that if I could get paid every week? And then also, what's the daily number? What's the daily number I need in order to survive? Because now you can set a daily income goal. So before I get into how to make up your money and your cash flow, the other thing is specifically also in the situation of you've been fired or you've been laid off, immediately get on LinkedIn and also start building and putting together a new resume. And that will help you a lot. But speaking of LinkedIn, and we have a great question in the live chat, someone wants to know what primary platform I'm streaming on. And right now, I cannot stream the podcast to Twitch because of its exclusivity deal when you become a Twitch affiliate. So the podcast is not live streaming on Twitch right now. I'm streaming on my Create Something Awesome Today YouTube channel for the podcast. I'm streaming to my LinkedIn Live, my Facebook page, my Facebook group, and to Periscope and Twitter. So I'm streaming across all these different platforms right now, 5 at once, because of today's sponsor.
We thrive thanks to the support from our sponsors. Here's a word from one of them.
When it comes to live streaming, StreamYard is the simplest solution out there, and I really do feel like it is the MVP tool of live streaming. Not only does it let you live stream to multiple locations at once, and if you're on the pro plan like me, you can stream to up to 8 locations all at once seamlessly, but it also is a great and convenient platform for bringing guests into your live streams without them having to download any additional software. They just click a link and they're right there with you, giving value to your audience, entertaining, surprising, and delighting them. So I really love StreamYard a lot. You can have up to 10 people on a stream for a roundtable discussion. You can have one-on-one great conversations, pulling people in from your audience. I just think that's one of the best solutions in the live streaming world, and I'm proud to have them as a sponsor and a partner. And they really have helped me with bringing my podcast to the level that I've always wanted it to be. So if you want to make a smart move like everybody else in the awesome squad, make sure you're checking out StreamYard. It is linked in the description down below. If you go to robertoblake.com/go/StreamYard, you can help support the podcast and try it out for free. Or if you want to be like me, you can go to the pro plan, and I don't think you'll regret it at all. I think that's pretty dope. And I'm a proud paying customer of StreamYard myself and have been for over a year. So I want to thank them once again for sponsoring the Create Something Awesome Today podcast and everything they do for the creator community. All right. So when it comes to tuning up your resume, I really think that one of the things you have to look at is LinkedIn. But I also think you need to just get a resume template and just really update that and make it as polished and professional as possible. I think it's even worth potentially investing $50 to $100, even though I don't like telling you to spend money on things when you're broke. If you're broke, spending $50 to $100 to get someone to update your resume and help you optimize your LinkedIn profile is going to help you get out of broke sooner. It's one of the best things you can do, because if you try to do it yourself, it may not work out nearly as well or help you get hired as quickly. And so you want to take the ability to just streamline that process and get a new job if possible. Because the thing is, a lot of people think that, oh, well, I got fired, or, oh, I got laid off. Time to become an entrepreneur. That's actually, in many cases, the worst time to become an entrepreneur. I think the best time to become an entrepreneur is when you are gainfully employed. I'm not even joking about that. I probably need to do a dedicated video about that fact. But I would say that replacing your immediate income in some form or fashion is the most practical thing you can do to eliminate the stress. Now, while you're, waiting on somebody to approve that and you're putting in applications, I think that replacing your income is something you should immediately do. And I'm going to talk about that and how you can immediately replace your income without specifically being hired for a regular job, a traditional job, right? So, because the thing is, this is one of the more nuanced but controversial takes that I have. I don't believe that anyone needs a job. I believe that what they need is an income source. I'm going to repeat that. You don't need a job. You need an income source. Think about it. Do you actually need a job? Do you need an employer? Do you need a 9-to-5 job? The answer is no. It's just the most accessible, convenient, and readily available means of having an income source. When you retire, if you do retire and you end up getting a pension and a retirement, you have an income without a job, right? Now, what people will do is say, well, you earned that by working for X amount of years and putting in your time, and that's why you get your pension and your Social Security and so on and so forth. But that's just a contrivance that we came up with and a rationalization that we came up with. If you could make an income and not have a job, you probably would. And there are people who do that. Even if you look at the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, people make steps and moves to ultimately have an income without necessarily having to constantly be in the position of a traditional job that requires you to trade your time for money, a fixed amount of time for a fixed amount of money. They move to different versions of generating income by creating value in a different way. So that'll become important later when we talk about cash flow, because you need to separate the idea of trading time for money at some point. But when you're fired and you're broke, you have to look at whether or not you can sustain that because you have no experience with it. And so the best thing to do is to go back to a conventional job and employment during that situation, then get a side hustle on top of that by cutting out some of your hobbies and recreation to get a second income source that's tied to results and not time. Stack your cash, save up, get savvy, improve your skills, and then you can move up the ladder in terms of ways to earn income. Because there's actually multiple justified ways to earn income, because what most people won't tell you, especially since what it's become popular is and the thing is, there's a difference between internet scams and fake gurus versus like genuine methods of entrepreneurship or an alternative lifestyle. So what I'm saying about that is there's a difference, because what most people won't tell you on either side of this conversation is that there are 7 forms of income that the IRS accounts for. And only one of them is a traditional job in terms of earned income. So the IRS feels that there are 6 other legitimate ways to earn income that they can tax you for besides your wage-based 9-to-5 job. So when people talk about real jobs or traditional jobs, they're talking about 1/7 of what the IRS considers a legitimate form of earning. So just like really think about that and remember that the IRS says that there are 7 different legitimate ways for you to make income. And so this is important. Off the top of my head, it's earned income through wages. Then there's the revenues through a business or side hustle. Then there is dividend income through stocks, capital gains income also through stocks, rental income, obviously from real estate. And then there is royalty income. And there's one other type of income, and I'm spacing out on it right now. So, but there's 7 types of income that is reportable to the IRS. And so if it can be taxed, it's legitimate. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to actually see if I can look up in my phone what the other type of income is, because I'm really want to make sure that I make that point clear. But I listed for you the 6 that I know off the top of my head. And I think the only type of income that I don't make is rental income at this point. But yeah, there's earned income, there's profits from a business, there's dividend income, there's capital gains. Oh, interest income from savings, CDs, and bonds that don't have any special tax treatment. So that is the other one. So yeah, so it's earned income, profits from a business, dividend income, capital gains, interest income, rental income, and royalty income. And the only one I don't have is real estate right now, but that's in the makings over the next 2 to 3 years. Is I will have all 7 forms of taxable income, and the IRS will be very happy. But anyway, to my point, tune up your resume. Make sure that you do everything to tune up your resume. And we will also talk about skills you can learn that help you beef up that resume going forward. But let's talk about cash flow. Let's talk about making money right now. Let's talk about how you can make money today through legitimate means right this minute. Right this minute, if you need extra money and you need to make even an extra $30 today, I'll tell you a website you can go to, usertesting.com. They're not a sponsor. This is something I did years and years ago, and I tell everybody whoever needs to make extra money to just do this. With user testing, you can look over people's websites and apps and web designs, and you can give feedback because they're going to use that to improve the website. Web designers use this that have paying clients and so on and so forth, so that they can run it through testing and have real human user experiences on it. And big websites do this all the time. Companies do this all the time. Even companies like Microsoft pay people to do user testing, right? And so you can make like $15 to I think $25 per user test, and they average 5 to 15 minutes. So think about it and how right now people think that a $15 an hour wage is good wages and that would be considered a good job, right? You can make $15 for completing a 10-minute task. This is the beginning of changing your mindset. If you can make $15 for completing a task that takes 10 minutes, isn't that better than making $15 an hour? Think about it. So there are several websites in the gig economy that allow you to make transaction-based income instead of time-based income. Do a task, get paid. So you have things like user testing. You have rover.com, where you literally can be a dog walker or a dog sitter for people, and it's location-based. It's like the Uber, but for dog care or pet care. So you have rover.com, and you can literally, someone will pay you to walk their dogs for them. A lot of times you have people who they might be a little bit older, or maybe they got hurt on the job or something like that, but their dogs need to be walked or cared for, taken care of, and they just physically can't handle it, and they need a little bit of extra help, and they'll pay for it. And it's all in this app. So it's on your phone, and you can use rover.com, and you can do that. If you have a car, and right now we have COVID, and it's, whatever, but you can do Instacart. Obviously, you can do Uber, you can do DoorDash, you can do Uber Eats. There's so much there when it comes to that, because we're not even talking about freelancing yet. We're literally talking about essentially doing people's chores, doing people's shopping, doing little things for convenience. And it's not just because, these are rich people who are lazy. These are people who just aren't in a situation to do it themselves and they need help. And a lot of times it's people who are older who just physically aren't in a position to do it anymore. It could be older people who don't have kids to help them. So there's a lot right there in your neighborhood and in your community using a lot of these gig economy apps where you can get paid, and you could literally be making $100 a day doing tasks. And the thing is, it may not take you 8 hours in a day. You could still keep a lot of your time in your day while you're waiting for alerts on the phone with a lot of these apps. Someone in the live who's part of the live experience, thank you. And by the way, we usually do the podcast on Wednesdays. I'm doing it today on Monday to make up for missing last week. So I might do a couple of episodes to just kind of make up for days that I've missed. But there's things like Amazon Flex. There's things like Shipped. There's so many of these different opportunities. And it just allows you to help people. Then there's doing virtual assistant work, helping someone like me in their business. And you can do that. Amazon has a virtual assistant, set up as well. They also have TaskRabbit. There's also certifications you can take online. You can learn a platform or a software. A lot of these are free. And you can become certified, and then you're more competitive, and you can do certain gig work for businesses and for entrepreneurs, and you can make a lot of money doing it. You wouldn't even be starting your own business. You would just become a contract worker. And the thing is, if you secure full-time employment, and you get a job after you beef up your resume and after you update your LinkedIn profile, or you just ask everyone you know, because I would ask everyone I know, hey, are you hiring? Hey, is your job hiring? What do you do? Could I do that too? And I would try and get another job if I was broke. But I also, having been fired before or laid off, I wouldn't trust my job anymore, and I wouldn't get comfortable ever again. And I'd be doing this gig work. I'd be doing this cash flow based income immediately afterward, and I would just give up some of my nights and my weekends and my hobbies. Am I telling you to work to death, and am I telling you to hustle to death? No. But as a Black Latino man in America, and I'm bringing that up for a reason, who has no 4-year degree, who grew up in a single parent home, who is a child of divorce, who has literally watched people go through these things over and over and over and over again my entire life, I can tell you this: do not get comfortable. And do not think that the world that your parents grew up in, where you work for a company for 30 years and you retire and they give you a watch, that world doesn't exist anymore, homie. It's over. 21st century happened. It's over. 21st century is 20 damn years old now. Get over it. That world doesn't exist anymore. So what I believe is this. I believe that if you've ever felt like you're at the mercy of an employer or at the mercy of anyone, that instead of complaining about how hard you work and that you're entitled to a break, understand that life doesn't hand out breaks. And understand that you might need to sit there and just say, you've got 1 hour, 2 hours every day. That's it. And that's what you're rationed to do whatever the hell you want. And the rest of your time, if you're in a bad situation, is making sure that you will never be at the mercy of someone else ever again. And that's worth it. That's worth feeling a little bit of burnout. That's worth feeling FOMO and fear of missing out. That's worth feeling like everybody else is having their fun and doing their thing. If you know that you're working toward the goal of never, ever being at the mercy of somebody else ever again. You know, fear is a servant that longs to be the master. So just be careful that you're not always acting out of anxiety and fear. I've lived that before, where, you know, you're acting out of anger, fear, anxiety, and you just suffer through it. But I think you have to do a mental health check there. And I think you have to have a disciplined routine. And I think that if, especially when you have been laid off, the most important thing I think you can do is immediately put yourself on a schedule, just like if you were still an employee. Put yourself on a schedule, just like you were still an employee. When you're feeling sad or frustrated, do something productive. Work out or read a book. Those are my 2 biggies. If you're feeling sad or frustrated, don't turn on Netflix. Don't turn on a video game. If you need something other than work, I think you still should have a productive habit. And instead of turning on TV and video games, which, by the way, I'm not against TV and video games. I love video games. I love me some video games, right? Those of you who follow me on Twitch know that. But I think that what has helped me is when I get in my feelings, I do crunches or push-ups. When I get in my feelings, I do crunches or push-ups. Or I'll go and I'll do personal self-care. I'll go and I'll soak in the tub with some Epsom salt and ease the muscles in my back and in my knees. You know, I'll go for a walk and get some fresh air and some sunlight, get that good vitamin D from Mr. Sun. Mr. Sun, Mr. Golden Sun, please don't demonetize me. You know, so there, you know, I would, this channel isn't monetized yet anyway. Need you guys to help it go up there to get that. But the thing that I'm saying is, I feel that the best forms of escapism and relaxation are ones that also have some long-term benefit to your personal health and well-being in the form of exercise or in the form of personal enrichment. And I believe that books and physical fitness are the best outlets for our free time, especially when we're in a bad or stressful situation. I think that books are better than TV and movies and video games when we're in a bad situation, because we might get some value on top of our escapism, and we're working our our critical thinking, and we're improving ourselves. It doesn't have to be personal development books. It can be fantasy, it can be fiction, it can be romance, it can be history, it can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be a personal development or business book. I'm just saying reading is always a good outlet. The other thing is the physical fitness piece is actually going to physically help you be stronger, more mentally aware. It's going to improve your stamina. There is no downside to physical fitness. So in terms of recreation and escapism, physical fitness is probably the best thing there is. Taking care of your body, building up that temple, is probably the best thing you could possibly do with your free time. So I believe that putting yourself on a schedule, and when you want escapism or relaxation using either books or fitness as your outlet is probably the best thing that you can do. So that productivity, that's my ultimate productivity hack. And the next thing that I want to really say is, from a cash flow standpoint, the gig economy, doing things like usertesting.com, doing things like TaskRabbit, doing things like being a VA through Amazon, which stands for virtual assistant. Those things are absurdly powerful when it comes to the ability to earn money every single day. Because I think that from a cash flow standpoint, instead of doing what you normally would do, yes, go out and get a job if you are immediately broke. But remember that you're still holding your breath and waiting for 2 weeks to get a paycheck that you have to spend out, usually making late payments and making up for all the times you didn't have money. I want everyone to immediately have a second source of income and have the means to make extra money every single day. Imagine if you could make $30 every single day. If you make $30, at the end of a month, you almost have an extra $1,000 without an employer giving you a raise. Without an employer giving you a raise, you can make an extra $1,000 a month if you can make like $35 every day. If every single day you can make $35, that means if you can do user testing 3 times, if you can go on to Fiverr and find a $50 gig on Fiverr, if you can do a little bit of DoorDash, a little bit of Uber Eats, a little bit of Amazon Flex, if you can figure out $35 side hustling, and in many cases, it won't even take you an hour. It won't take you an hour to 2 hours. Can you imagine? You already don't have a job that pays you $35 an hour, but there are tasks that people will pay $35 for that you can do in less than an hour. Some of them 15 minutes, some of them 30 minutes. So if you do that, then you have the ability to create an extra $1,000 a month. And I think that's important in an economy here in America where most people don't have $1,000 in savings in the bank. 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 in savings. 80% of Americans don't have $10,000 in savings. I just gave you a practical way to make extra money, to make an extra $1,000 a month, let alone a year. That isn't really that difficult or challenging. Even if you already work a 9-to-5 job, the time that you give to one TV show is enough to change your life, because an extra $1,000 a month would be an extra $10,000 a year. And even if you don't make $35 every single day, even if you had a 50% fail rate, you would still be making an extra $500 a month. You'd still be making an extra $300 a month. That's still $3,000 to $5,000 a year that came without your employer saying, hey, you deserve more, you get a raise. And all you're having to do is just make a change in your lifestyle and put on a second source of income if you already have a 9-to-5 job. But if you don't, and you have lost your job, while you're waiting for someone to say, okay, you're hired, and then you have to wait 2 to 3 weeks for your first paycheck to come in, which is then going to go to late fees for all the bills you couldn't pay. In the meantime, you can be making money every single day by doing tasks. So again, I've done entire videos on the main YouTube channel. I'll probably go back and add that to the show notes. But on the main YouTube channel, I've covered so many ways and so many websites. I have a video that has 10 websites on how to make money online. I have done an entire series of videos on how to make $100 a day. And there are so many websites that let you do this. Usertesting.com, using gig apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Uber, Lyft, but then also things like Rover, from rover.com, that lets you do pet sitting or dog walking for people in your neighborhood. You don't even need a car. You could be walking distance and you have to walk the dogs anyway. There are elderly people who just can't do it anymore. And Fiverr is with 2 R's at the end, Fiverr. So there's a lot that you can do. Instacart, you can go grocery shopping for those elderly people in your neighborhood or people who can't because of COVID. There's so many people making money with that. So when you're broke, which usually comes as a result of either being fired or laid off or losing your job or the industry going under, You need to immediately, yes, beef up your resume, go look for jobs, ask everybody if they're hiring, all that stuff. But remember, you've already been fired before. There's no reason to believe it won't happen again. Don't trust the job. Don't trust the employer to just always be there for you. They can't always be there for you. Just like my friend Pat Flynn, they may not even want to let you go, but if they have to shutter their doors, like what happened to him in the last recession, what happened to so many of us in the last recession, the job may not even want to let you go. It may not be something where they have a choice. And so then your choices are gone too. So make sure you have a way to make daily cash flow and that you know exactly how much money you need to make in a month, in a week, in a day, and look at the scheduling for your bills. That's why you use free apps like mint.com and Truebill, so that not only do you know how much you're spending, you know on a calendar when everything is due. In fact, you can combine this with your Google Calendar. Google Calendar is free, and you can plug in the due dates for every single one of your bills. I mean, it might feel a little stressful, but you'll know every single day how much money has to come out and go out of your accounts. And if you have a way to make money every day, and you know how much money has to go out of your accounts every single day, that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. Now, let's talk real quickly about skills and about career development, and then we'll talk about credit repair, and then we'll end the show, and I'll hang out with the people in the live audience across LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope and do a little bit of Q&A with them. So you'll want to follow me in all social media and set alerts so you can be part of the live viewer experience. But before we do that, once again, I do want to shout out one of our amazing sponsors.
We thrive thanks to the support from our sponsors. Here's a word from one of them.
If you're a YouTube content creator, you absolutely need to be using TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy has been my secret weapon over the years to help me grow my YouTube audience and also just make me more productive. In addition to their suite of great SEO tools that have helped me with ranking in YouTube search and also being very competitive in every niche that I do, they've also helped me save my time when it comes to productivity with their amazing suite of tools, whether it is the find and replace tool that's helped me fix affiliate links or broken links across hundreds of videos, or whether it's the ability to use their SEO studio in order to prepare my YouTube videos in advance when it comes to titles, descriptions, tags, and even upload my thumbnail so that once my video is ready to go, I just click a button and everything else is done and I can focus on engaging with my audience. So if you want to get the free version of TubeBuddy, go to tubebuddy.com/awesome and use my link in order to grab that and get a free trial of TubeBuddy. And if you want to go ahead and just use all the pro features like I do in the legendary plan, you can go ahead and use discount code Roberto's Buddy and they'll give you 20% off of any paid plan of TubeBuddy. And that discount code is good for life. So you get 20% off every single month from your TubeBuddy paid plans. Of course, you can try it out for free. There's no risk to you. Go to tubebuddy.com/awesome. Tell them Roberto sent you. All right. So one of the things I want to talk about now is career development in a position where you have to rethink everything. In a situation where you might have been fired or laid off, or you know that the industry or company is downsizing and it might only be a matter of time before it's your turn. There's somebody in our audience who says that they were actually just laid off from a marketing agency in California, not because their company wanted to let them go, but because their company downsized the entire department. That happens all the time. I've been there myself, and sometimes you are a new employee. What do they say? Last hired, first fired. So again, I think that the security and stability of 9-to-5 jobs, and again, I'm not one of these people who's hating on 9-to-5 jobs or the working man. I'm talking about stability. I'm talking about security. I'm talking about anxiety. I'm talking about fear. And the thing is, I think it's realistic to have anxiety about this because you can't predict things like a pandemic. You can't predict things like market downsizing. You really don't have security if you work a 9-to-5 job. You don't. And you also have the anxiety of waiting every 2 weeks for your money and hoping nothing goes wrong, hoping that there's not a banking error, hoping that they paid you the right amount. It is so much more of a risk and a leap of faith than people think. And you still have day-to-day expenses throughout those 2 weeks while you're waiting for a paycheck. Again, a lot of people end up paying more because they end up paying late fees. So I really believe in having multiple income sources and doing gig work, even if you are working a job, even if you have a good salary. Do not trust that to be there for you. Have another income source available to you. In fact, my honest to God goal for all of you would be to eventually build the 7 sources of income that the IRS taxes. That should, in my mind, be a goal. It's why there are parts of this podcast that are going to talk about creativity. Sometimes we're going to talk about financial education and financial literacy. Sometimes we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and business building from my perspective. And we're going to have guests that can help enlighten us about their journey and their experiences and teach us a lot of these things. But it's this narrative. It is this narrative, and it's hard. It's even hard for me as an educator to sometimes speak up about this, because if you say anything in social media as an entrepreneur against 9-to-5 jobs, a lot of people want to think that you're going to scam them or con them, or that you're in a privileged position and you're disrespecting the working class people, or that you're a fake guru. And I understand that there is a lot of scams out there, more than I ever realized, honestly. I realized that there is a lot of misinformation out there, but I also think that we are old enough, most of us in this community, to understand that we've been lied to by our traditions, by our conventions, by the portrayal of the middle class in media not matching our own lived experiences. I think that you can look at the fabric of our society and what we've been taught and what we've grown up with and what has been portrayed to us in media culture and in pop entertainment, and you can basically look at it and realize that it's all a lie. And the truth lies in your own lived experiences. The truth lies in common sense, and the truth lies in the market. The truth lies in how we consume ourselves, how we as consumers operate, how direct to consumer actually works is the truth, because it's just driven by cold, ruthless numbers that don't care about us. And that's where the truth always lies, in my somewhat cynical opinion here. I'm very optimistic and I'm very positive, but I'm also ruthlessly practical because life hasn't given me a choice, like in that regard. Like, I'm the most realistic person, I think, about this. If I can toot my own horn for just a second, I think that I'm the most realistic person about this, because I think that we cannot escape the fact that money matters and that it has a very powerful hold on our day-to-day lives, and it is one of our largest sources of anxiety. But the problem is that we've been conditioned to trade our time, which is immeasurable and invaluable, for a limited amount of money, and been told that that's what we should do and that that's okay. And that if we're not doing that, that we're not conforming and we're not doing it right, or we're not doing something legitimate. But again, I will remind you, the IRS feels differently than that narrative, because the IRS has 7 legitimate sources of income that they tax, and earned income from a 9-to-5 job, wage-based income, is only one of the 7 income sources that the IRS taxes. And therefore, why are we not building out these other legitimate means of income? Why are we all taught and trained to focus on one thing out of 7 things? And why are we never taught to expand into the other 6 legitimate sources of taxable income? Why are we not taught that? That is the thing that I think is the most egregious. And so the thing that I will also tell you is that we're not conditioned and taught to value in ourselves the ability to prioritize skill-based labor, high income-based skilled labor. And it's big. And the thing is, and this is no disrespect to anybody, non-skilled labor, things that just require a strong back instead of a strong mind, will always be saturated. They will always be saturated, and it will always be one of the first things to get cut, and it will be considered disposable in one way or another. Technology often replaces and disposes of that. Cheaper labor being available can do that, whether it's cheaper through automation or through competition. And so, again, in my mind, this is a practical argument, not a political one. This is not a political argument. It is a practical one. Technology eats everything. Technology eats everything. If you're wondering why the stock market doesn't reflect the job market, look at the companies that are profitable and look at the fact that they are technology based and they don't really rely on non-skilled labor, nor would anybody in non-skilled labor professions have the disposable income that would mean that their removal from the economy would impact these companies in a meaningful way. In fact, if anything, because quarantine has pushed us to rely more on technology, these companies profited. And that's not going to have a reversal or a correction in a post-pandemic world. It's actually going to just mean that more companies that were affected will automate. More companies that were effective will become software based. More companies that were affected will look at their logistics pipeline and limit the number of human beings required to perform a task. Because that's in their best interest, not in your best interest. And like I said earlier, you're the only one that you can trust to fully act in your own best interest. You can't turn back the clock. So we will always prioritize convenience as consumers, by the way. We ourselves will always prioritize convenience as consumers. Look at your own life and your own spending. You may have been inconvenienced by everything that happened in the pandemic, but even with 50 million people, 20 to 50 million people leaving the American job market, how much did your behavior change? How much did your behavior change? How much did your spending habits change? How much did those people not being able to participate in the economy impact you directly? It was probably very limited overall. And the thing is, people will want to deny it because it is a harsh and ruthless and very ugly truth. And I'm trying to say it as politely as possible because I do not want anyone to internalize that and feel hurt by it because of me talking about it. But I can't shy away from the economic reality and its real world consequences to people. And I don't want to just blame or demonize companies or capitalism or the government or this or that, because even if we could pin the blame on somebody, that doesn't help you tomorrow. It doesn't help you today. It doesn't change the fact that you have bills to pay. And that's really where my concern is. Putting yourself in a position to not be at somebody's mercy in the future is where my concern is, because that's what I had to do. And so I'm not suggesting that means go out and start a business tomorrow. I'm suggesting that right now, that in addition to whatever free time you have, that you square away an hour to learn something new and learn something that people pay a lot of money for. Pay something that a lot of people can't do and would find competitive. And the best way I know to do that is to learn software-based skills. When you learn software-based skills, you become the top 10% or even the top 1% of a given industry or field, even if you don't go to school for that, even if you don't have a certification in it. If you can prove results and you learn a software or you get a certification online in a software, you have an advantage over 90% of the job market, my friends. And again, I'm not making this a meme, but I'll tell you this, 90% of the human beings on earth do not know how to code. It is one of the things that could easily, compared to anything else, I can't imagine a labor-based position, a physically intensive-based position. There are so few of them. Where you can make $100,000 a year. But when you look at software-based professions, the number of software-based professions where you can make $100,000 a year is astronomical. It's astronomical. And if you look at the people, if you look at who the wealthiest people in the world are, who didn't inherit their wealth, they all went into technology and software. They all learned these skills. Anyone who didn't inherit their money or go into financing or get very lucky in the stock market, what'd they do? They went into software. And people who don't go into software, they go into sales. So there are a lot of things you can learn. If you don't feel you're smart enough to do software or coding or learn something like design or anything like that, like I did, then learn and get your real estate license and sell real estate. Sales will be around forever. People will always need a place to live. and you could just go into high income real estate. You don't have to sell in the neighborhood that you yourself would live in, you know. You could just do that. And I'm not saying everyone will be good at it, but I think that that is a way to go. Now, Adam brings up a good point. Adam in the chat brings up a good point. Are you not somewhat at the mercy of platforms when it comes to things like live streaming? And if the idea is to learn how to use software or code, is that not putting oneself at the mercy of someone else? It is and it isn't, because the thing is, before the Industrial Revolution, little history lesson, before the Industrial Revolution, there was no such thing as a job. There was only a such thing as a trade. There was no such thing as a job. There was only a such thing as a trade before the Industrial Revolution at scale. And by I mean at scale. There were obviously employers, but there weren't corporations. You had small businesses. Everything was direct to consumer. You either contributed value to your community or you weren't allowed to be part of the community. That's how it was. So you were either a farmer, a tanner, a tailor, a blacksmith, an apothecary. You had to contribute some value, and it was a relationship directly between you and the consumer, aka direct to consumer, no middleman in between. These software systems and appliances in some ways are close to that. They are in some ways close to that. You want to know how Ninja and Twitch streamers make a lot of money? It's because they have a direct to consumer trade as performers. It's not any different than somebody who is a street performer passing a hat around. Okay, it's no different than being a breakdancer in Brooklyn, except for the scale. So when you're on Twitch like Ninja or anyone, or like my friend Miss Click, what happens is you have thousands of people, hundreds of people that are donating to you versus the dozens of people in Grand Central Station if I decide to breakdance and pass my hat around. And by the way, there are people who make more than $100 a day breakdancing and passing their hat around. At least there wasn't pre-pandemic, that was true. Okay, so digital though allows that to be scalable. And the consumer decides what they want to spend money on. So it's the supply and demand. And so you always have a choice to peddle your wares at that point. So again, you can't be fired from that. Now, someone would say, well, you can be deplatformed, but there are multiple platforms. Yes, some are major centralized platforms and are bigger than others, but there are also specialty platforms. And again, it's the diversification. So you talk about being at the mercy. I have, yes, my best affiliate programs, there's like 2 or 3 of them. I'm still a participant in probably 20 affiliate programs, and they all make me some money. Some make more than others, but I always will make some money. And so I have diversity. So that's one thing. And affiliate revenue is just one income stream, and then I have multiple sources within that income stream. So that's something I did over a period of time. When it comes to something like YouTube, I have more than one YouTube channel. Granted, my main YouTube channel makes the most in YouTube AdSense revenue. It's a big pull for sponsors, but I also have sponsor relationships with my Instagram as well. I've been starting to get to the point of getting $3,000 brand deals or better just on my Instagram alone. So that is significant. I have a substantially bigger integration that I'm working on even now that is more than 3,000. So having multiple platforms, multiple streams of income, multiple skill sets sometimes gives you multiple options. So the thing is, like, if YouTube went away, I would be uncomfortable. I wouldn't be dead. I would be slightly uncomfortable compared to now, but I would still be relatively comfortable than the far majority of people because I have other things. For example, I have awesomecreatoracademy.com. I have my coaching business. I buy ads for my coaching business instead of relying on my reach in social media. I buy ads. So my products and services are sold through advertising as much as through my social media platforms. I have my own email list. I have direct to consumer access. So I can either do direct marketing through ads or I can do marketing through email. So I have that ability. And there are other social media platforms. And starting over would suck, but I actually am skilled enough to know how to do it. And I have the resources to also leverage other people's time. So I wouldn't want to, but I could. And that's kind of even the point here that I'm talking about with what I would do if I was broke today. If I lost everything today, here's what I know. And this goes into the career development thing. If I lost everything today, what I haven't lost is my knowledge and my capabilities of skills. I still have all of my relationships. And that's another important thing, building relationships with people and networking with people, and knowing that you're not just networking with people at your own current income level, but also networking with people and building friendships with people at a higher income level, not to use them, but realistically to understand that you need to be able to provide value to people who have disposable income. So guess what? I'm still a top tier video editor. I'm still a great marketer. I'm still a great SEO specialist. I still am a great email marketer. I'm still a great salesman. I'm still a great affiliate marketer. If I lost everything today, I would just go very I wouldn't go to an extreme right away, but I could go very humble. I went and stayed with a relative when I worked in New York, when I was getting a job at an ad agency. I'm not above the idea, if I had to, of literally selling everything I need that's not essential to doing my craft and downsizing. And literally, if I had to, I wouldn't want to, but I would start over. And a lot of people say, oh, easy for you to say, or why don't you prove it or something. But the thing is, you don't do that if you don't have to, because it derails all of your future potential. But when you're not given a choice, you have to be willing to say, what can I do and what are my extremes? And the good news for me is I've learned how to code. I can still build websites, and I still know most web hosting platforms. I still would make thousands of dollars off of affiliate marketing for web hosting, even without a big YouTube platform, because I would just go to being a specialist and a consultant for that in the B2B sense. So I already know how to do that and how to make thousands of dollars. And I've done it before, and I've worked for a web hosting company. I already have relationships to where, in terms of getting another job, I could look at any of the companies that I've ever worked with that have sponsored me, and I could just go to them and I could look for a salaried position doing sales, social media, marketing, management, any number of things. I still would keep some of my good cameras, and I know that I can make money as a photographer because I'm very good at it. I know that I can make money as a videographer because I'm very good at it. I know that I could keep one of my drones and sell the rest, and I could do drone videos for real estate people. I know that I could lock myself in a room for 30 days or less and get my real estate license and have the ability to use my savvy, my charisma, my silver tongue, and sell some real estate and put money in my pockets that could get me through the hump of a couple of months while I try to do other things and rebuild. I know exactly what I personally would do if I had to start over tomorrow. It wouldn't be comfortable at all, but I would know what to do, and I would be anxious and I'd be frustrated, but I wouldn't be so fearful because I know that I have high income skills. I know that I have skills that are valuable to people with disposable income. I know that I have skills that are valuable to people in the current realities of the market. I know that I can build an e-commerce website for somebody. I know that I can handle the back end of their Shopify. I know that I can handle the back end of their YouTube channel. I know how to provide value to somebody who has money to spend. And I know that it's because I have a strong mind instead of a strong back, that it's worth more. So I would have options. The difference between being broke and being poor is being broke is a lack of money. Being poor is a lack of options. So Adam says, I agree with trade-based knowledge and learning. You're discussing diversification throughout the platforms, and I'm wondering about two things. One, how can people keep up with ensuring they create for or use all platforms with nightmare scenarios like all or most of the platforms dying or becoming swallowed by just one of them? It's an unlikely scenario, Adam, and so I won't even really entertain it. The reality is that the entire world would probably end before that happens. It's unrealistic to plan for the demise of Google, Facebook, and Amazon without planning for the demise of Western civilization, in which case we're all just living through the Hunger Games anyway. So if you're going to plan for the demise of Google, Amazon, and Facebook, you're planning for an economic shift that would mean that you need to be watching wilderness survival videos anyway. So I just don't think that's realistic. I believe that Western civilization will collapse before the big tech oligarchs collapse. I don't know if anybody disagrees with me on that. I don't think people realize how much Microsoft Azure and Amazon's cloud services are tied into the infrastructure of the world governments. If they think, and Google's cloud, I don't think people realize how much Google's cloud, Microsoft's cloud, and Amazon's cloud services are tied into the infrastructure of every Fortune 500 company and every major global world superpower. And that if those three companies alone go away, it's the end of Western civilization. That's it. I don't think people understand that. I don't think the average person, I don't even think people who are very intelligent and educated really understand the technological fabric of the world that we live in. So that's the thing. So to somebody's point in the chat, my whole thesis is basically coming from not only teaching someone how to fish, teaching them how to find the bait, how to build a rod, how to build their own boat, how to make their own net, eventually how to build another boat, and then how to manage a fishing fleet. That's kind of like my thing is. So where I would go with this is I believe in going to high income based skills and learning how to trade in on that knowledge and knowing which platforms allow you to best deliver that direct to consumer at scale. You can always do it without the scalability of the platforms in your own services and through using online advertising, but I would also just leverage the platforms because they do currently exist. As for how you keep up with all the platforms, you don't initially keep up with all the platforms. You move to a platform that plays to your greatest strengths and abilities, and then you look at how that can bleed over to other platforms. Because it's not keeping up with all the platforms. There's only so many platforms. Really, if you focus on YouTube, people who watch you on YouTube want to follow you on Twitter. There's no keeping up with Twitter. It's called, you can tweet a couple of times a day. You could ration 15, 20 minutes out of your day to be on Twitter. You can reply to things, like things, throw up a couple of polls. You can even automate the entire experience aside from your replies. I'm talking about your posting. So there's Twitter is low effort. As for Instagram, it's literally 15 minutes out of your day. It's literally 15 minutes out of your day for people who watch your YouTube or your Twitch content, who care about you, to want to see your Instagram stories that literally took 15 minutes of your day, or an Instagram post that could have been a clip of one of your videos, or a still from one of your videos, or just a photo you thought was cute, or even something on your desk, and a caption. It literally takes, in terms of keeping up with all the platforms, I think everyone exaggerates how difficult it is to be on multiple platforms when they say focus on one platform. It's not that difficult to make quality content for Instagram and Twitter. And that's two platforms right there. LinkedIn doesn't require daily content, but you literally could just do a status update post or a text photo post or something thoughtful, or ask a question, or run a poll every day and not run out of content. Okay? So, I don't think it's that difficult, which I should do better about LinkedIn, by the way. I don't think it's that difficult to do. I could do an unedited video for 5 minutes and post it to LinkedIn every day with just my thoughts on social media and marketing or business. I could literally just do a 2-minute to 5-minute unedited take, and it would probably be fine. I could do it on my phone, I can do it from this camera, and I can upload it directly to LinkedIn, and it would be quality content. It'd probably be better quality content than a lot of what is on LinkedIn. I literally could post to every platform except for YouTube, and it would take me a whole of 1 hour for every other platform than YouTube. YouTube is the harder platform. I don't recommend going daily there. You can make one video a week and you can put as much effort as you want into that one video a week, but it would also probably give you the resources to siphon something from the process of making that content. If you make your YouTube content a certain way, like maybe the way I do, you could probably siphon content for every other platform off of just making a YouTube video in a very specific way that lends itself to more content. A primary example is that I'm literally going to be paying somebody every month to take these live streams, cut these segments, and make 3 to 8 minute videos out of every live stream. And they probably can get 5 videos out of every live stream that I do, hopefully once a week, which means that they can get 20 minutes of videos a month out of just the Create Something Awesome Today podcast live streams, then get things out of my YouTube live streams, even my back catalog. So we're literally going to probably be able to go next month, I hope, to daily content on my clip show channel, like with minimal effort, because we can chop that up. Like, someone says, dude, that's my next task for my podcast, but I can't afford to pay someone, so that's got to be work. So Michael, if you can't afford to pay someone right now, there's a situation where there are people who want to start their video editing business or their video editing side hustle. So right now, find people who are trying to build up their resume and their reel. And if you can't afford to pay them right now, like, you could have people rotate through and do a little bit of that work, since all it is mechanical editing of chopping things up. And if they want to do anything spicy a little bit because they want their portfolio, because the thing is, I know people are against it. And I know that people talk about, oh, don't work for free, or don't work on spec, or it's exploitation, or all these things. Michael, think about something you can do for people that's not money. Think about something good in someone's life you can do for them that's not money, that would help them advance on either a personal or professional goal. And then you can also use that, and not just the exposure that people whine about, even though exposure is valid because we buy ads for exposure. We pay money for exposure. So exposure has a value. You can't say that it's working for free. It's an exchange, but find an exchange that someone is willing to do and that is helpful or meaningful to them, or some value you can add. Because like I said, not everything is a money-based transaction. Not everything is about money. There are some people who need other things that you could offer them. And so I would figure out what that exchange is with people and go through a cycle of people until you can afford to pay someone. Then you can go back and see who delivered the most value and who you had the best relationship with. That becomes the permanent video editor. And then you have all this great stuff edited from your podcast. It might have helped you better monetize the podcast. And then you're in a better position and you can pay someone. And now you have options in terms of candidates. And you helped some people jumpstart their video editing career. Because when you're a new video editor, the problem is just editing your own YouTube videos or whatever gimmicky thing you want to do for your reel, it doesn't cut it. Not having references of people you've worked with who can vouch for you, it doesn't cut it. The only way to get that work is to do it up front, usually for people for free, if you're not already have a really solid YouTube channel of your own or something. And even then, there's, I hate to break it to people, but there's no getting out of building a body of work, and that's going to be work you do for free. There's no getting out of making your first YouTube videos, your first podcast episodes, and not making money. So you're still working for free. The thing with working for free for someone else is you get a reputation, you get referrals, and you have a portfolio, and you can have people vouch for your credibility, and it matters. It matters. It's what I did in my coaching business. It's what I did when I was a freelancer doing graphic design. It's what I did as a photographer. It's what I did as a video editor. It's what I did as a public speaker. And I still, to this day, whenever I enter a new arena or vertical, am not above and have not been above working for free. I had to do free content for products to get access to products when I had 30,000 subscribers. Today, people complain about having 5,000 subscribers and not being paid and getting a brand deal. I couldn't get a brand deal at 30,000 subscribers back in the day. But it was a different time, so I get it. But like, I just want to make that point that there's sometimes in order to advance long term in the marathon, you have to do some upfront losses, and it might look like working for free, but what it really is it's working to build a portfolio and a reputation. And your reputation is not that you worked for free, because you don't even have to tell people that any of the work in your portfolio was free work. You just have to give your referrals, and they're probably not going to say, oh, well, I paid $0, because it's not in their interest to look like a cheapskate either. So that's just my thought on it. That's just my thought. So we have another question in the live audience, and then I'm going to get back to my last point for the recorded podcast, and then I will do some Q&A with people. But I just did want to bring this one up because John Pullum has a question. I currently use ScreenFlow on my Mac for editing. It does a decent job for me. What are your favorite editing programs that are great and won't take months to learn? Okay, well, for video editing, I obviously use Adobe Premiere, and I've talked about that at length and why I'm an Adobe Premiere user. I might make a new video about that actually, and why I use Premiere, even though everyone's just gonna say I'm biased and I'm an Adobe shill and that they've sponsored me before, so you can't take my word for it. It's like, I was using Adobe when I worked in corporate. I was using Adobe when I was a kid. I was using Adobe before they ever sponsored me, and it's because it's what I like. Bias is not limited to money. It's also sometimes just what's easiest for you is what you have a bias towards. So I recommend Adobe, but there can be a learning curve there. If you use ScreenFlow, I would recommend as an alternative, look at Camtasia. Camtasia is easy to learn. It's affordable, works on Mac and PC. I've used it, and I would definitely recommend it. If I needed a permanent tool that I can pay for once that does everything reasonably well, it would probably be Camtasia. If you want something free, even though it does have a learning curve, DaVinci Resolve. So that's pretty much all I have to say there. Something in between in terms of affordability and features, there's also Adobe Rush. Adobe Rush is awesome. And there is iMovie. I think iMovie is extraordinarily limited, but there is iMovie. So yeah, the next thing that I do want to bring up here is, and it's my final thought on this, is in terms of what I would do if I was broke. I would also look at fixing my credit and doing so for as little money as possible by not necessarily hiring I wouldn't hire a credit repair service if I was broke. And when I was broke and I was in my 20s, the way I did it was this. I basically went to Google University. I went to Google University and I taught myself credit repair by educating myself about how credit scores work, how to pull my credit report, how to dispute things, how to settle accounts with collection agencies, how to settle with the original creditors or bill collectors or any of that. And what I did was I had, in my 20s, almost every single thing removed from my credit that I could, and other things I had to settle. But I had a lot of my credit stuff eliminated based on technicalities. Anything from a typo where they got my name wrong to any inaccuracy at all. And I got it removed and canceled out and didn't have to pay back that money and had it removed as a negative mark from my credit. And I will tell you guys, as embarrassing as it is, I had at one point 8 derogatory marks on my credit. I had at least 8 derogatory marks on my credit, and I was able to get rid of all of them between ages, I want to say 27 and 30. I got rid of all of them. In fact, today, my TransUnion credit score is perfect. I have one error, and it's an error because I actually paid and settled an account, but they sold it to another company, and then they are not honoring the settlement. Because I paid $2,000 when I owed $3,000, and it was settled, and they can verify it. But like the company that bought their thing is trying to claim otherwise now. But I have a lawyer fixing that, but it's dropped from my TransUnion, and if nothing else, it will drop at the end of this year, and then I will have 3 perfect credit scores instead of 1 perfect credit score. But I have a perfect credit score of 805 in my TransUnion. And it happened because I did the following. For one thing, I'd listened to people about not having credit and credit cards being bad. And I realized something. Credit is good, debt is bad. Repeat after me. Credit is good, debt is bad. The systems of America are dictated by your credit score. So not having a credit history and not having a credit score is one of the worst things, and it's one of the worst pieces of advice. And I know I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey. Everyone's a fan of Dave Ramsey, but I'm telling you, straight up, you will pay more for your car note in terms of interest, and it will suck. You'll pay more sometimes in rent. You will have larger deposits on your utilities. You will have a lot of hassles when it comes to trying to become a homeowner if you do not establish good credit. And if you're a person of color, you're a minority, or you just grew up in a poor background, like, my friends, Robert and David, who grew up in the trailer park, we bonded over wrestling back when the WWE was WWF. They got crapped on for being poor and living in the trailer park. So I know that it's not just people of color. I know that. No one has to lecture me on that. But I will tell you, if you've been growing up with the mentality and the rhetoric that, oh, credit cards are bad and credit cards are a scam, you just haven't been educated about credit and about credit scores, and it's setting you up for failure, because the way that people in the top 10% and 1% play the game is different than the way you and I were taught to play the game. I just think that our parents do the best they can, but they were handed a crappy tutorial. Their parents were probably handed a crappy tutorial, and then we get a crappy tutorial that has been just handed down through 3 or 5 generations. And so until somebody in the family rewrites the rules, you just keep getting crappy tutorial after crappy tutorial, and it never sets you up to be more successful than the generation that came before. So if you want to set up to be more successful, here's my thoughts around this, because this is part of the financial education piece, is I learned that what I should have been doing is I should have, from the age of 18, I should have been getting a credit card. Basically, I should have been getting 1 to 2 credit cards almost every year of my life in my early teens and 20s. And here's why. Credit history. The advantage of a long credit history is disproportionately one of the strongest things in your credit score, aside from your credit percentage utilization and your payment history. And so by getting more credit cards, it means that if you have a lot of good payment history across a lot of credit cards, one missed payment or bad payment isn't as detrimental. When you only have 2 or 3, it's crippling because, out of 3 things, one of them is bad. If something is bad out of 10 or 12 things, though, you're still above a 90%, though, aren't you? But when one thing is bad out of 3, you're down to 66%. That's bad. You see what I'm saying? This is, again, diversification, which is also scored in your credit score. So what I did is, just like I'm a good student, and just like how I learned everything about social media platforms, I learned everything about their algorithms. I learned the credit card algorithms. I learned the credit bureau algorithms. I learned everything I possibly could. I learned what the scoreboard was. I learned what to keep track of, and I set goals. I found out and realized that to have a truly A+, I looked at all the factors. I looked at credit card utilization. I looked at credit card mix and diversity. I looked at inquiries, which are the least of the problem. I looked at credit age. I looked at average credit age, oldest credit age. I looked at number of accounts. I looked at everything. And I learned a couple of interesting credit card secrets. Number 1, I learned that they rate you as less of a risk if you have total combined credit accounts available up to $50,000, you're considered less of a risk. And by that I mean the combined amount of credit that lenders have offered you across all of your accounts. If it's over 50,000, you're considered an A+ in terms of being less of a risk. I learned that if your average credit age is more than 8 years, averaged across all of your cards, you're an A+ in terms of being less of a risk. I learned that if your oldest credit card account is more than 12 years old, you're an A+ and you're less of a risk. I learned that if you keep your credit utilization under, they say 10%, but I found that actually your best bet is under 5%, that you're an A+. Now that means your utilization across all of your cards. Here's why that matters. To be in that 5 to 10% range, if you have emergency spending, the reason that it's a $50,000 thing is because 10% of that would represent $5,000. $5,000 represents an extreme medical emergency, for example, or something extreme happening that might happen in terms of a household expense, a car, any number of things. So just keep in mind, or a big purchase you might need to make in terms of an appliance, or something you might need to do for your wedding. So again, that's why these numbers, I figured out, oh, this is how they figured that out. This is why they made those choices. So I figured that out. I figured out that you can still have a good credit payment history with only one missed payment, but you don't want it to ever be more than one, or any payment going past 30 days late, etc., etc. So it's always best to make a payment and to make it on time, and also to pay above the minimum required balance in terms of interest. So I learned those things. And so by learning those things, I learned, one, the technicalities for removing my derogatory marks. I also learned I needed more credit cards. So I went out and I got a secure credit card with my bank. I got 2 secure credit cards to start out with, and then I started getting more after I did well with those and building on to that and getting more accounts, because I found out that in terms of showing a credit health history for your credit, and I got this information by searching on the internet. By the way, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a CPA. I'm not any of those. I'm not certified. I'm telling you what I Googled. And you can find this and you can look this up. I think one of the places I found this was I went to myfico.com and I read everything, literally every article on that website I could find at the time. I went to Free Credit Report. I read everything. I went to Capital One and I looked at that. I also looked in all of the credit card and banking apps. I got all of the credit card and banking apps and I read through everything that they score and measure in all of those apps. So that was another thing I used. That was another trick that I used. Okay. So I found out looking in the apps that having 21 lifetime credit accounts is what will give you another A+ score in terms of diversity accounts. And that helped me realize that when someone gets a student loan, they break up your student loans and you end up having multiple accounts. And then those accounts are in good standing. And the whole time you're in college, they're counting those accounts as if they were paid. So that's why you see students have good credit for some reason. And then also they get offered all these credit cards with high amounts when they're in college. And this happened to my siblings because remember, I went to community college, so I never got any of that benefit. And I didn't take out any loans. But they use those student loans, ends up giving you automatically a bunch of accounts with a good payment history. Just like that. So when you're a student and you have student loans, your credit score is inflated those 4, 5, or 6 years that you're in college before you have to start paying down your student loans. And for a brief period before you have to make your payments, or if you have deferments or anything like that, it artificially inflates your credit score because you have more credit accounts than average people your age, and you have them in good standing, and you'll get offered better credit limits. My siblings with no job were getting offered better credit card limits than I did, even when I started making 6 figures. I'm not joking. So that's like really kind of sketch about how credit cards work, but it's good to know that information. All right. So you're armed with that knowledge. Now, what happened in my case was I didn't have that benefit or whatever, but I learned about it. So I realized the diversity of my accounts, my car loan payments, the one personal loan I took out, which I almost immediately paid back. All of those things would be counted in my credit history, every credit card, every bank card, all of that. So I made sure that I understood that and I used it to my advantage, and I didn't worry about my inquiries, and I focused on being able to establish a good baseline of credit diversity, and I used my cards responsibly or not at all. Or what I did is I'd put something like a magazine subscription on them and then pay it off just so that I could keep the cards active. So that's how I did it. And what I will tell you is when you're broke, spend $0 and don't use your credit cards. If you take out the credit cards, like maybe put a magazine or put your Hulu and Netflix on, and then if you don't trust yourself, cut up the damn card. Like, But building credit matters so much. Just don't use and abuse it and buy crap you don't need. But having that baseline for emergencies is also important, because if you run into a bad situation, especially while you might be unemployed or if you lose your job, you might need those credit cards to cover a bill that might be important, that if that bill doesn't get covered or if rent doesn't get covered, you're in a much worse situation. So if you have to, you use those to buy time. You use those to buy time. And so that is my thought. So just to kind of wrap up and to go through a summary, and then we'll go to Q&A, having ended the podcast. And if you're in the live audience, you get to hang out afterward. When you are broke, and what I would do is I would look very hard at your spending and know what is coming out every single month. What is it that you actually need to survive, and break it down even to a daily dollar amount, and make sure you put when your bills are due in something like Google Calendar so you know. So I use apps like mint.com and I use Truebill. Beef up your resume, ask everybody for work, do everything you can to optimize your LinkedIn profile. That's number 2. Immediately find cash flow based work in the gig economy using things like TaskRabbit, use things like usertesting.com, use things like Instacart, use anything you can to make money every single day. If you make $35 a day, you can make $1,000 a month extra. Whether you have a job or you don't, that's valuable. If you don't have a full-time job and income, do everything you can to use task-based work instead of time-based work to make $100 every day. And that should cover you in most situations, whether you still have a job or not. And while you're waiting for somebody to go over your applications or give you a call back. Consider how you can repair and build your credit and get those credit cards so that you have something for emergencies if you end up depleting your savings and you still need to address an immediate problem. Credit good, debt bad. Learn to deal with debt instead of avoiding credit. Learn to deal with debt instead of avoiding credit. And by deal with debt, I mean pay it down and do it responsibly. And finally, number 5. Learn skills that pay very, very well. Do not rely on time-based, labor-based income. Learn skills. The 21st century economy rewards a strong mind, not a strong back. Act accordingly. Figure out skills that will put you into markets where it's very hard for people to compete and where it's not saturated and where it's hard to make you disposable. Look very carefully into that and think about it. So that is my thought there. And so that is where I want to end the show today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And anybody who's on the live, you can hang out for a few more minutes. We're only going to hang out for about 10, 15 more minutes because I've got to do lunch and then I've got to get back to creating awesome content for you. But I really do want to thank everyone for joining me on the show. I appreciate you guys. Stay awesome.
This episode has ended, but your creative journey continues. Visit createsomethingawesometoday.com and access all links and resources mentioned in today's show, all designed to help you create something awesome today.
All right. Note to my editor, you shouldn't really need to do anything other than cut the pre-show and the after show when you're watching this back. And that should give you the main podcast for the audio and anything else we need to do. So we're fine on that. And to the clip show editor, there's some really good nuggets in there, especially in the last half. So that's probably where we'll pull our main 5 or 6 segments. Samuel asked, I haven't seen anything about applicant tracking systems. Are you talking about affiliate? Are you talking about affiliate systems? So I haven't seen that. Lake Show, are you supporting Trump or Biden? I'm voting for the guy who didn't say stand back and stand by to a white supremacist group. So I don't think that that should be hard to figure out. I'm still like, and I'm not speaking for people. I'm a black man living in America. How do you think I'm voting? Anyway, I hate political questions, by the way, because it's not as if most political parties or any politician in the main is going to be acting in your best interest. You're the one who's going to be acting in your best interest. But if you have the choice between voting for neglect or abuse, if you have to choose between any of the sadistic choices that life offers you, you choose neglect. You choose people who are going to ignore you on the premise that they also probably will stay out of your way rather than anyone you think might sabotage you or whatever. I mean, in general, most people are probably acting in their self-interest. And at best, if we are trusting people to act in good faith, they're not doing so in a way that's meant ill intent directly toward you or to sabotage you. But they also may not care realistically if you're collateral damage or may not consider any collateral damage to you. So again, I believe in pragmatism, not politics. You can vote however the hell you want, but at the end of the day, I only trust myself for the most part to act in my own best interest, and I trust the people around me to not act to my detriment. And I hold people accountable to that. And when people are made to understand that a way that they behave or act in is to my detriment, and I've made them aware of that and they continue to do so, they're dead to me. If I tell you that something you're doing is to my detriment and you've decided that, well, that's still too much in your best interest for you to concern yourself with what happens to me, you've made your choice, and now I'm going to make mine because you've chosen to be selfish, and I'm going to now act and hold you accountable to that, and I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to forget. So that's just how it is. Act in your own best interest. So again, I just don't want to be said, oh, well, you didn't answer the question or everything like that. And people like to BS that. I do believe that that question was just asked in good faith, because I understand that as a successful person and someone that is pro-capitalism, but human-centered capitalism, I understand that people are trying to figure out where people stand. And but I don't think we have to choose a side. I think that we have to declare our values. I don't think that we choose, people have reduced things to choosing sides. I believe that we declare our values. And I believe that tribalism and belonging to teams and groups and parties and all this nonsense has divided people where they probably have 80% of their values or more in common and cannot take the time to do any damn critical thinking and realize that we probably agree on 80 to 90% of things. And we probably, if we stop being selfish, might be able to come to a middle ground on the other 10 or 20%, or agree to disagree respectfully and walk away. Now, there are some things that are obvious deal breakers. We have to hold people accountable for disrespect. We have to hold people accountable for bigotry, hatred, or for things that are not done for the good of others. Things that where you cannot say realistically that somebody didn't choose to not do harm. And I think there should be absolute accountability on those, and those should probably be deal breakers. The rest of it should be a conversation. Things that are unless we're talking about exclusion, discrimination, bigotry, hatefulness, hateful rhetoric, things like that, things that are clearly wrong. We should be able to have conversations, and we should try to educate people. And the thing is, it should be allowed for people to communicate their sincere grievances, their sincere anxiety, and their sincere hurts without being dismissed or without being dehumanized or devalued. And I think people who can't agree to that are not making good faith arguments. And so entertaining conversations with them becomes an exercise in futility. But that's just my thought. That's my thought. And that's why I would have prior to the current era considered myself someone to be apolitical. I think that there has to be an evolution that becomes beyond that, because I'm disgusted by politics, but they exist, and I can't ignore the fact that I can't ignore reality, and I can't ignore realities that affect other people. I can't look sideways. I can't look away from it because it makes me uncomfortable, or because it is not, to some people. Some people have said, well, don't talk about it, or it's not good for business and everything like that. Choosing what's good for business over what's good for people says something about me, and that's not something that I'm comfortable with. So that's just how I feel about it. And that's where I want to end political questions, by the way. I understand that it's a sensitive time for people, and that's kind of where I want to end it, because I just don't know that this is a format or a place to have a nuanced, detailed conversation. And also, this is more broadcast right now, so it would end up being a one-way conversation. And so I wouldn't want it to be that. That's just how I am. So Lynette asked, I jumped off for a second, but I'm also not sure if my question was already answered. Are you open to providing feedback on graphic design portfolios? My husband is a visual artist and designer. It's one of those things to where if I have 5 minutes, maybe, but it's something that I'm not prioritizing and focusing on right now. And the thing is, I still do design in my own brand and in my business, but I'm also very business centric in that. I would say that your husband would benefit from like a graphic design Facebook group doing a roundtable on portfolios, more so than just hearing it from me. And I mean, I might have but I also don't want to open up the floodgates to everybody sending me their portfolios, but it's something I might have 5 minutes for. But in reality, I think that a peer review is better. And I also think that coming from me, because there's a double-edged sword to somebody who's an influencer having a platform, giving somebody a critique or a review, is that they might take things to heart instead of with a grain of salt. And any criticism or feedback, regardless of how well-intentioned or how much that person says they have a thick skin, is magnified by the weight of that person's following, and is magnified by the weight of that person's gap between their current situation. And I've been trying to figure out a way around that, but I just sometimes I think it's not as useful as people believe it is. I think that people are excited about it and they get flattered, but I also think there's a downside. Cassandra, thank you for your question. Could you speak to the mindset when you realized you were moving away from a job and more towards entrepreneurship, specifically how you scaled back on one and then dialed up the other? The thing is, I didn't scale back on one and dial up the other. Ultimately, I ended up leaving my job in a fire me or I quit scenario. But before that, I was doing preparation to leave that job for well over a year. And arguably, I'd been laying some of the seeds and foundations for leaving that job for many years. And it's basically the outline that I gave you in today's show. I constantly made sure that I was updating my own portfolio, my work that no one else could claim, my resume, building relationships, doing side hustle work so I would have referrals and a reputation. And I was collecting testimonials even before I left the job from people at the company. And anytime someone would leave the company, I would get them to give me a recommendation in LinkedIn, so that in the future, if I ever was fired or quit or had a falling out with people, because that was the nature of the company and why there was so much turnover in the company, I used the company turnover to my advantage to get referrals from people whenever I knew that they were leaving or on their way out, or whenever they quit, or whenever they were fired. So I always used that to my advantage. I would argue that many of you should do the same when it comes to your LinkedIn stuff, is do that. In terms of my career, I made sure I had my own body of work. So if the company said I can't use anything I did for them, that I would have my own body of work. I looked at my spending and I tried to make sure I wasn't creating any unnecessary overhead. I looked at things and I knew sites on the internet that I could do and make money same day. So user testing and things like that. There weren't a lot of them back in my day. There weren't a lot of them, but I knew which websites I could use. I used things like Hire Writers and iWrite and Text Broker, and I did my own blog and did Google AdSense before YouTube. I did all these things. I set up, and I didn't make money off YouTube for 3 years, by the way. If anybody is thinking that they're going to just start a YouTube channel, it took me 3 years to make real money off of the ads. So but I made more off of Amazon affiliate at the time. So I did everything to make cash flow outside of my job. And then by the time I got fired, I could throw more of my time pretty much immediately into finding my own clients, which I already knew how to do, and doing more gig work on the internet and doing more freelance work and doing stuff on Upwork. Back then, before it was Upwork, you had two websites. You had Elance and Odesk. So I was doing Elance and Odesk, and then it became Upwork. And so I did that. Before I left my job, I repaired my credit and got credit cards and did that. And so I had those as a safety net for a little while and then paid those back down. So whenever I wasn't making enough money, if I had to cover a bill, I could immediately do that. And I was also, when I wasn't working my 9-to-5 job, what I did to cut my spending was while I was at my 9-to-5 job, I got to a place where I stopped doing things with my friends that cost money. If my friends called me and they wanted to go out and do anything that cost money, I said no. And we would have to do something free or super cheap, or I wasn't going to be involved and I would stay home and save money. When it came to work, I stopped eating out as much. When I did, I was cheap. I was living off Subway sandwiches, and I was constantly going in with people on deals, or I would create scenarios where someone would actually pay for my lunch. I'm not even joking, where someone would treat me to lunch because I did a favor for them. So I started doing favors for people and then getting people to treat me for like, oh no, you don't worry about it, just treat me to lunch. And then I basically got out of spending money that way. I'm telling you, like, this is how frugal I was. I was that bad. But so were the circumstances. And I also even got people to agree to do a once a week potluck at the job. And so what I would do is I would just bring sodas. So I was spending $2 and then everybody else was bringing like a bunch of food. so I'm telling you, like, I'm not joking. Like, so that's what I did. And that helped me save money. So when it came to jumping from a 9-to-5 situation to working for myself and doing a lot of stuff, I added freelancing and gig work and side hustle stuff. And when I wasn't working, I was reading books and doing Google searches and practicing tutorials and learning new software skills, looking up which gig jobs paid the most in Odesk and Elance before it became Upwork. So we'll just say Upwork. I looked up what paid the most in Upwork. And then I was like, if I don't know that skill, I should know that skill. And I would sit there in my free time and learn it. Because my job, I was working at a web hosting company, I actually even learned things on the job, specifically with the goal of what happens when I leave the job. And I got myself as much training and requested on the job training for things and kept upping my skills. So if your job offers any skill development, any training, or will send you away for training, pay for it, buy books for you to learn something that benefits the job, double dip because you own your skills. They might own the job position, you own the skill set. That was my secret to success. Was I used everything to my advantage. I siphoned everything I possibly could out of that value. Whenever they were downsizing on equipment or old equipment, and they even wanted to throw something away, as far as a computer or a monitor or something, I would tell them to give it to me, and I would see if I could repair it. If there was a desk that they were getting rid of, I would say, give it to me, and I would see if I could like fix it. And I would do everything to, like, I volunteered at a bicycle repair shop that also was doing computer repair and donating the bicycles in the community and the computers to underprivileged kids in the community, to kids, to minorities, to like people who are poor. And as a result of volunteering and helping rebuild computers, I was learning more about that. And I also was able to help get each of my siblings a new bike so they could play outside. And I was also able to use this and be able, by working on them and getting access to the parts and components. Mr. Mathis helped me. He passed away several years ago, but this is like a long, long time ago. But like, I was able to use those resources even while being broke to get every single one of my siblings a computer that could help them. And I was able to build a network in our dining room of these computers by cannibalizing these parts and by volunteering. So I was able to get resources by volunteering, and I had to give up my free time. I had to give up nights and weekends and things like that. I did a lot of this while I was a student. And then while I was at community college, if there was ever resources that I could get, I took them. Like, people gave them to me. People said, I'm getting rid of this, I'm downsizing this. I did it. Even with my hobbies, people would quit the hobby and I was like, well, give me all of your stuff. Like, I had friends that would quit Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! I was like, fine, give me all your cards, or I'll do you a favor, I'll do this for you, or I'll do your homework, give me all your cards. And then what would I do? I'd go to the card shop and I'd flip and resell it. I'd create grab bags. I'd sell stuff on eBay. I was hustling it from the very beginning. Before you ever knew me on the internet, before I ever was Roberto Blake to any of you, I was doing every single thing I could that I could think of at the time, that I could manage at the time, to act in my own best interest and to get something. So I added to. I was never downsizing in some area. I kept piling on. But I didn't have a choice. And when you're in a situation like I was, and when you're broke, when your family's broke, I just add on. And that's just what I think. And until I couldn't, because sometimes that's stressful and it was hard on me and it was soul crushing and it was backbreaking, but it's what I had to do. And it's what in that situation was going to be where I was. There was not a healthy way to hustle because my situation was that bad. And I think that a lot of the rhetoric around burnout or hustle culture and everything, I think a lot of it's made up. And I think that a lot of it sometimes that isn't made up is bad advice being given by rookie entrepreneurs, people who've only been in business 2 or 3 years, people who haven't done the long haul, who haven't done it for 5 or 10 years. And usually a lot of these are kids who didn't work a long time at a regular job or retail or anything like that. They did it for like 1 or 2 years or a summer, and then they went into online business, or they did it straight out of college or straight out of high school. So like, rookie entrepreneurs are the only place where hustle culture exists in any legitimacy. Other than that, it's usually made up by the media. Hustle culture is somewhat made up by the media because you'll find anti-capitalism rhetoric in almost every hustle culture article you will ever read. And almost every single one of them, if they ever try to quote Gary Vee, they quote him out of context and they take sound bites from him, usually when he's talking to privileged people and telling them to work harder and not expect their employees to. He never like throws like anything in the face of people who are underprivileged. He's only aggressive. He's thoughtful with people who are underprivileged. He's aggressive with people who are privileged and entitled. And so they take the rhetoric meant for one audience and then use it to target another. And that's the world we live in, because frankly, media has become clickbait just like YouTube has. So I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed, but I expect it. But the problem is that people have little critical thinking ability and they can't parse that. I can. And I've also have met the man. And you can say that makes me biased, but it means I'm closer to the truth than they are, because they don't even get their facts right. So when I talk about this, if you're ever have been poor or broke or you grew up in a single parent home, you know the truth. You know that society won't change fast enough to fix your circumstances, and you know there's probably no healthy hustle for the 2 to 3 or 4 years that it takes to dig you and your family out of the hole, and that somebody talking about burnout or your mental health who's never had their lights cut off can't imagine and is telling you about being healthy. They don't know what they're talking about. People who have never had their lights turn off, never had their car repossessed, unless it was like some freaking Lambo or something that they couldn't make the payments on. People who have never lived in affordable housing or in a trailer park or anything like that are going to tell you about burnout and hustle culture and toxic productivity, but they've never had to dig their way out. They've never had that experience. There is no such thing for most people in those dire circumstances as a healthy version of digging their way out of the hole that doesn't require an intervention. And not everyone is so blessed that there's an intervention. And not everyone can wait for whatever election cycle they think is finally going to give them this miraculous version of the world that they want to live in. your circumstances are most likely to change by your own hand. And that's not, lift yourselves up by your bootstraps speech. That's a fact check on the lived experience you already have. Most of the good things that have happened in your life have been a result of something you had to do for yourself. Most of that. And frankly, a lot of the things that you've experienced that were hardship often were things that were outside of your control, but not everything is. It's more likely you didn't have the ability to resist outside forces. And so my rhetoric is become someone who can resist those outside forces when they come, because on a long enough timeline, there's always something and always somebody that comes up against you and presents adversity. And just because you reach a certain power level in life, don't think that there's not somebody out there that might be working against your best interest that also isn't raising their power level. Just like in every other video game, you leveled up, so did the baddies, so did the bosses. Your problems in life raise to the same level as your capabilities, as your powers, as your skills. People from the outside don't know any better. But you got to live it, and you know better. You know that. You know that every level you fought for to get to in life, that your problems got there and did the work too. They became different. They took on different forms. They manifested differently, but they weren't slouching. Somewhere out there, some freaking demon in the ether was saying they're figuring out how to level up too. So I believe that. And so I think that the best thing we can do for ourselves, the thing that we can do to love and respect ourselves the most, is to always be aware that there's another level and that there's always going to be some adversity and some problem, and that you should never fully believe in your invincibility and your safety and your comfort or your privilege, whatever it looks like. You should never believe in that. And what you should believe in is in your ability to evolve and your ability to grow as a person and your ability to rise to the occasion of any challenge that comes before you. And yes, to overcome challenges that you already have. That's what I believe. So, that's just one man's point of view. Shantae Danielle says, when building and repairing credit, should someone start with getting a credit card or start with getting rid of derogatory marks? I start with research. I would start with education. And again, this is not financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Disclaimer. I would start with becoming as educated as possible. I would start with removing derogatory marks because it doesn't require you to do anything else, and it costs you usually zero money. If you can remove it based on technicalities or inaccurate reporting, then it costs you $0. If it's something where you need to pay a bill to negotiate, I would simultaneously start a payment arrangement, and if possible, to get a credit card that you get instant approval on with your current level. Research instant approval credit cards, and if you get credit cards, get no annual fee credit cards. You don't want to spend money to repair your credit if you can avoid it. Get credit cards with no annual fee and go for ones with instant approval. So you'll want to do your research and find those. A lot of the American Express cards meet that qualification, and they're the easiest I've known to be able to get approval for. Your bank might be able to give you one if you have a good history with your bank and you don't do a lot of overdraft, and they may not even require it to be secure, and they will usually offer $500 to $1,000. If it needs to be secure, then you might need to save up, and it might be $300 to get a secure credit card. So that's my experience there. Yep. Angela Jackson says, totally agree about Gary Vee. Never met him, but love his message. Same. Michael asked, do you have a strategy or just go off of feeling and intuition to know when to take a task on yourself or find someone to assign it to? This is a great question, Michael. Here's my thought on this. The way that I approach it is I look at something that I hate doing, something that I suck at doing, and something that isn't a good use of my time. And so it has to fit one of those three categories. So if I'm bad at it, somebody else should just do it. Because if I'm bad at it or I'm not the best at it, if I'm mediocre at it, somebody else should do it. If it's something that anyone can do and doesn't require my special skills and abilities to do, and it's not anxiety creating in terms of my name having to be on this or something, or like I will give that to somebody else because anyone can do it, they should do it. A good example of this is I hired my sister to be an office manager for my home office. So I hired my sister, I pay her $15 an hour, and what she does is she manages my home office. This includes tasks like shredding documents when I need to do that, so that I don't clutter the office with paperwork because I'm trying to go as paperless as possible. But when I can't, we do shredding. And so she does that. Why? Because it's 10 minutes of my day that's not being a content creator, a coach, a consultant, or being active in my community. Those are things that only I can do. Anybody can shred papers. Shipping, receiving, and sending. Anyone can do that. All right. Organizing and doing a lot of the things with labeling and handling the gear closet, the supply closet, and sometimes helping to catalog things. We're cataloging things and we're doing all the serial numbers on all my equipment for insurance purposes. Anybody can do that. I shouldn't do that. Anybody can do that. Cataloging and listing everything on my bookshelf and creating the list for my book recommendations and categorizing them, creating a spreadsheet around that. Anyone can do that. So I don't do that. So she does that. And any number of other things, and just some of the maintenance tasks around here, sometimes assembling something. Like there's no reason that I would need to do that. And eventually we're moving her into some admin work with regard to sorting and checking emails and eliminating old emails and spam. Something I don't need to do. Anyone can do it once they have the right training. So the other thing is, if you're going to train people to do something that's a specific task, you should follow a protocol that I learned working for a military entrepreneur. We have something called medals. So it's a mission essential task list. So we create those. You can think of these as standard operating procedures. So there's a standard operating procedure for how anything is done so that somebody can step in and they have a written list of instructions and tutorials on how to do these things and why they are mission critical and how they are to be done and the order that they are to be done in. And so that's how outsourcing works and delegation works. So if you're trying to delegate things, that's my approach. Have I ever worked with Elementor or with WordPress? Yes, both. I like Divi as a framework. Yep, if I'm bad at it, someone else should do it. That's a great perspective, and it's what better sports coaches do. They play off people's strengths, not force people into a mold. Agreed. Bad at, don't like it, or anyone can do it. Taking that and running with it because it is hard for me to not take it on myself. Very difficult for me initially. I did a lot of stuff myself for way too long, too many years, and so I had to get over it. Dominique Morin says, did you ever have a fear of public speaking? And if you did, how did you overcome it? I absolutely hated public speaking in school, was terrified of it. I was bad at it. Doing more of it got me used to it, and I ended up liking it. I ended up becoming a public speaker as a result of my writing and my YouTube channel, and I'm speaking at events. My first speaking engagements were all paid. Interestingly, most people have to speak for free. I didn't do Toastmasters. I didn't do anything of that. I just worked at it really hard. And also live streaming on the regular basis helped a lot. We're going to take these last two questions and then we're going to end here because it's hour number 2 and I need to eat. Do you find yourself often being the only person of color in this game? I'm a little new, but you're one of the only people I can find or think of off the top at what I do. So Black Brand Friday, a good question. I am not, and I actually talk to a lot of other people of color. If you're talking about specifically in terms of YouTube coaches, I'm one of the very few. I'm probably the largest in the space, but I'm one of the largest YouTube coaches in the space, period. There are very few of us that have over 100,000 subscribers. Very, very few of us that have close to 500,000 or more. I think that that's just me Nick Nimmin, Tim Schmoyer, Daryl Eves, and Sean Cannell, and Benji Travis. And so that's pretty much it. And in terms of at that amount, that number is about to increase though, because Sunny is getting close, Vanessa Lau is getting close, and then you have Catherine Manning as well. I imagine in the next 2 years that those YouTube coaches will be at 500,000 subscribers or more, just like me and my friends, because I'm at 482,000 now. So I'll be at 500,000 by December, I think. So probably November, honestly. But the thing is, there are in general just not a lot of people of color who tend to teach due to a number of reasons. And a lot of people who become successful, even in entrepreneurship, as people of color, decide to double down on their entrepreneurship versus teaching. Teaching slows down literally every way that I make money. People think that it actually makes me, in some ways, it makes me good money to be an educator. Don't get me wrong. And it's opened a lot of doors for me. But I would make more money if I prioritized being an affiliate marketer more than the many ways that I teach people for free. The podcast, for example, the YouTube channel for the podcast doesn't even meet the current requirements in terms of subscriber count for YouTube monetization. Guys, do everything you can to help get the podcast to 1,000 subscribers. But the podcast isn't even monetized, so people can't super chat. People can't become members, and people can't watch ads. But I spent 2 hours today of my time to do the podcast. And then I will also be paying somebody to do the clip show edits, which also aren't monetized yet, and also to do the audio side. Those are all things that take up time or money for me to give free value up front. And yes, it builds my brand long term, but I do those things literally at a net negative loss, because this is me not doing a $600 to $1,000 coaching call with the same amount of time. This is not me making a YouTube video for a brand where I would make thousands of dollars. This is not me making a YouTube video that will help grow my monetized channel and help me to make, $10 for every 1,000 views. Like, every video is at least worth $100, $150 at a minimum the month that I put it up. So just remember that when it comes to that kind of thing, financially, a lot of people in color either aren't in a position to be in certain spaces because of a barrier to entry in terms of money to even get there, or an opportunity cost that they don't, think is worthwhile. Excuse me. In terms of some other people of color in the entrepreneur space, you have Erin on Demand. I don't think Erin on Demand is a YouTube educator specifically. I think she focuses a lot more on entrepreneurship and business. I know she's done a few videos about how she grew her YouTube channel, but I don't think it's a primary or one of the big focuses of her channel, but maybe. I know also Kelly Stamps talks about YouTube, but she does it in an entertaining way. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know that that would be like being a YouTube coach. So, but I would count, you can count Erin on Demand. I have no issue with that. Kat Theo also talks about it, and Vanessa Lau as well. And Vanessa Lau is more of an Instagram coach, but she also talks about growth on YouTube as well. So yeah, there will be more people, I think both women and people of color, that end up in this space eventually. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity cost. As advantageous as people think it is, and as much money as there can be, there's a lot of trade-offs, and it also means that you end up in a customer service like business. And for a lot of people, they don't want to do that, especially right now when it might feel easier to commoditize personality and entertainment value. Teaching, even when you make money at it, teaching is a sacrifice, and in a way, and teaching also does in some ways put you under the scrutiny of other people in terms of being called out. And there's a lot of resistance to the idea of ever paying people online for teaching or for content or for their time. Where ironically, there's a lot of questions that you could raise in the value that institutions provide right now. And I'm not as much anti-college as much as anti-debt, but I also think it's worth questioning why the universities in a pandemic world feel that they can charge you for a Zoom call that's a lower quality than the ones I do, and charge you the same rates that they want to charge you for being in person after spending the last 15, 20 years devaluing online education and its legitimacy. They now want to charge for it at the same rates as in person. So I would question their intentions or legitimacy there. I hesitate to use the word scam, but it feels that way. But I'm sorry, my face is dry from these lights, so I'm just like itchy all over because the lights are whatever. But that's 2 hours of lighting, so whatever. So my throat's dry, my face is dry. That's a sign that it's time to wrap up the live stream. But if you're watching on any other platform and you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/CSAT podcast, CSAT podcast, like Create Something Awesome Today podcast. And you can go ahead and do that. And a subscription helps. I think we're getting closer and closer to the watch time requirement for the podcast to be monetized. We need your help to get to the subscriber requirement, because I think we're still a few hundred away from hitting that. And I just do need to be more consistent about the podcast. We'll probably do another episode this week because I usually do them on Wednesdays. So maybe around 11 on Wednesday or something like that. But I do appreciate all of you tuning in, and it is a pleasure to do these podcast episodes with you guys and to have these conversations. I feel very grateful for them and for everybody who participates. But yeah, the Clip Show channel should also be linked on the podcast channel. If it's not in the description, I'll do that later in the replay. But ultimately, I feel really good about where we've been going with the podcast. It's been something I've been looking forward to. Wow, we still have a ways to go on the public watch hours. We're much further away from the public watch hours than I thought. So please make sure you're also tuning in for the replays, because apparently we haven't even cracked 1,000 hours. We haven't cracked 1,000 hours of replays yet. So that means I guess I gotta do whatever it takes to promote the podcast viewing experience and get every episode of the podcast to get like 1,000 views and get people to watch as long as possible for us to get there. Because it'd be great to go ahead, and have this monetized, and then also be able to include that in some of my YouTube income report stuff that I do every month. So anyway, thank you guys for the great questions. Thank you for participating. I'll answer this one last one. Is starting a podcast not to make money, but to make friends and contacts a viable thing to do? Anything you want to do to build relationships is viable. The thing is, you do give up time. And so even if the goal is not to monetize something or make money, I think it's valid to try to make money at things, even if you enjoy them, because the amount of time you have to make money, especially while you're still young and you're still strong and you're still healthy, should not be taken for granted. So I'm okay with doing things and not wanting to monetize them. I do it all the time, or doing things that are not monetizable or scalable. But I also am in a position of comfort right now to where it is more reasonable for me to do those things, having met other situations in my life head on and gotten to a comfortable place. Like, if you're in a comfortable place, I'm okay with you doing things that don't make money. If you're not financially in a comfortable place, I would urge you to take as much advantage of using your time and prioritizing revenue or income generating activities as much as possible, because it matters when you're if you look at if you have aging parents like me and you look at what they can't do now, and you look at it and you really think about, oh crap, here's the amount of time I'm going to live. Here's the amount of time I have reasonably to be healthy and strong and at my best. You act differently if you look at, and so some of you may not have aging parents. Look at your grandparents. Look at anyone you know over 50 or over 60, and then look at where you are, and you'll act real different. You'll act real different. I'm really adamant about that. I think it's that important. I think it's that serious. I think that if you really look hard at what older people go through, and you realize how much they may not have prioritized, because it's not that it's like about, because no one regrets not I wish I had more time, not I wish I had more money on their deathbed. But what I'm telling you is the circumstances in your life as you get older are largely a matter of the compound interest of decisions you made when you were younger, including and especially decisions around money and how you spend your time and how you spend your time in relation to money. So I think about that, and that's why the way I deal with money is a matter of acquiring resources, and I look at it from that standpoint of I'm acquiring and gathering resources now that will benefit me later, and I make that a priority. Even the things I do for my health and my fitness are things I'm doing now to build up my body so that over time, as father time chips away at me, it's not so bad. And I think that's where I'm going to end today. Anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay awesome. I'll try and I know I owe you guys a bunch of audio episodes. Those will come up later, and they'll be everywhere podcast can be listened to. Thank you so much. Stay awesome. I will see you guys back here on Wednesday. Book recommendations. 30-something Millionaire and Your Money or Your Life. And also I would recommend I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And if you want any of those as free Audible books, go to robertoblake.com/audible and get 2 free audiobooks forever by signing up for Audible. So I'm just going to drop that in here, robertoblake.com/audible, and get 2 free audiobooks for life. Even if you don't continue to use the service, you get to keep those. So that's a free trial. It is an affiliate link, and it does help me out. All right, you guys, stay awesome. I'll catch you on the next one.